Dale with Off the Beaded Path BeadStore.com. Thanks so much for joining me for this retro redo where we are going back to a project all the way from September of 2012. In September of 2012, I taught you how to make the Cellini Spiral Bracelet, or tubular peyote bracelet, as I called it at the time. And this video not only is going to be our retro redo, but it is also going to be week 10 of our peyote stitch series. Now, I'm going a little bit backwards because my plan was to show you guys how to do tubular peyote stitch next, but I have a new beading friend here in North Carolina. His name's Donald, and he had some specific questions about this project, and I thought it was a great time to go ahead and answer those questions in a new video format that looks way better than the backward video from 2012. So we're going to work on learning how to do that Cellini spiral. Now there is a difference between Cellini and tubular peyote. In tubular peyote, you are predominantly using one size of bead, whether it's a delica, a size 11 seed bead, or whatever type bead you're using. Now, when you are doing that, there is also conventionally a step up that you have to do as you are doing tubular peyote stitch. Cellini spiral is a variation of tubular peyote in the fact that we're still doing a similar stitch, except for we are going to use various size beads, and technically there is no step up at the end of the round, which is great for those of you who have issues with step ups. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's take a look at the materials that you're going to need for the project. The two bangles here are ones that I made in the original video all those years ago. They have held their shape really well, and they have held up really good to the elements and wear. But I made another new one for the revised pattern that I did, and I really, really love this one with these Picasso 6.0 seed beads. So these stack really well, or you can put them with other pieces, wear them individually, whatever you want. But the initial ring of beads that we pick up is going to determine what our Cellini looks like. So this one is going to be what we do in the video today. But I did up some samples that I wanted you to see of other ways that it's going to look. So you could see here, I've used a different count of beads to give me a smaller tube. And you can see how much that looks different just depending upon the beads I picked up. Here's another sample that I did, again, using different beads, different bead counts. And all the ones I'm showing you today are actually on the pattern itself, and the counts are listed on there. So this is one where you get the spiral, but it's nowhere near this because it's using only two beads, just different colors of those beads. Here's another one, and you can see I've used more beads in that initial ring, so I get a larger diameter tube, and it looks very different from the others. And finally, the last, or well, no, I got one more, I think, to show you besides this one. But you can see here, I have used a lot of different beads in this one, and it gives me a very, very, very spiraled piece. It kind of looks like a wave or a shell. I don't know. It's just very cool. And finally, this is my favorite one that I've done out of all of them, and I actually am going to make a whole necklace out of this. I love this. So again, you can see there the difference in how these look just depending on the beads that I used with the initial ring count. It's all the same stitch, just different looks. And again, the counts for these are found on the written pattern on the website. To get started with our bangle today, I'm going to thread on 115, 111, 18, 16, 18, and 111. So my beads are going to look something similar to this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring this down. I've started out with 2 yards of thread, and I'm going to bring it down, and I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to pass through the first bead I added again. So I'm going to be passing through the 15 so that when I pull this, it's going to leave me a little ring of beads like this. Now, I'm leaving about a 6 to 8 inch tail thread here because if you're going to make a bangle, you need that tail thread. So that is what it should look like. So we're going to pick up a 15. And when we do this, on this first row, we're not skipping anything. We're just continually working. So I'm picking up a 15. And I'm going to pass through the next 11 of that ring. I'm not tying this because this ring needs to be loose enough to incorporate all the beads, especially if you do one with a much larger diameter. I'm going to pick up an 11, pass through the 8, pick up an 8, pass through the 6, pick up a 6 and pass through the 8. Pick up an 8. Pass through the 11. And now this is where it will change and be different from tubular peyote, which we will go over next time. In Cellini Spiral, there's no step up in the stitch. So when we pick up that last bead, which is going to be that 11, I'm going to go ahead and pass through the first, the first 15 added in this round. So basically, I'm going to skip a 15 and go through a 15. I'm going to pick up a 15. I'm going to go through the 11 sticking up. So I'm going to skip an 11 and go through an 11. I'm going to pick up an 11, skip an 8, go through an 8, which is that one that's sticking up. And you, on this first row, you kind of have to pull tight and almost make the beads lay the way you want them to start. The more rows we do, the more it will pull together and it will work out, so don't worry. Picking up an 8, I'm going to skip a 6 and go through a 6. Pick up a 6, skip an 8 and go through an 8. Pick up an 8, skip an 11 and go through an 11. And then when I pick up the 11 this time, I can grab it. There we go. I'm going through the next 15 that's sticking up. So again, I skip one and I go through one. So I'm going to leave this laying flat. I'm going to hold it flat so you can kind of see what it looks like at this point. Now I'm going to take and kind of push everything upward as I work the next row. So I pick up a 15. I go through the next 11 that's sticking up. And I give it a pull. Pick up an 11. Go through the next 8 sticking up. So it's way over here. It's going to feel super weird, but I promise you, as it pulls together, it will work. Because see, when I pull it tight, you see how it's starting to spiral there? Now pick up an 8 and go through the 6 sticking up. So we're still skipping one and going through one. See right there? See how it pulled that together? And in just a minute, once it starts going, you'll see how it will all line up and it will look fabulous. Now pick up a 6, go through the 8 sticking up. Pick up an 8, go through that 11 that you've got sticking up there. Thread on an 11. And we're going to pass through the 15 sticking up. So again, we skip a 15 and go through a 15. And we're going to just continue this as we go around. So let me do a couple of more rounds so you'll really start to see that spiral. I've been working for a couple of minutes and I have about 2.5 inches complete on the spiral. You can see that spiral is really coming together and looking nice, but I am running out of thread and I could probably do about 2 more rows, but I always like to have enough thread that I can pass through several beads before I cut them off. So I've got a new piece of thread here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those 2 ends together. And then I'm going to make a knot with those 2 threads. I'm going to separate the ends. And then gently, I'm going to pull that knot all the way down to the 6/0 seed bead. Then I'm going to take those 2 threads again and just knot them together. For the next couple of rows, I am just going to wrap this around and get it out of my way, and then I will continue to work for a few more rows. Once you have a few more rows complete, then you can thread a needle. I'm using a size 10 with both of your tail threads. And then all I'm going to do is simply pass the needle through the size 6 seed beads. And then once I've gone through about 8 to 10 of those seed beads, then I can go ahead and trim those little excess tail threads and just continue to weave my piece. So let's talk about sizing for your bangles. I really wish that there was a tried and true formula that you could follow when trying to figure out the sizing for your bangles, but honestly, there's no set specific way because of the fact that different beads that you use are going to determine the sizing. So if I use something that has different beads with a larger circumference, it's going to need to be a lot bigger than, say, something that I make with one of these beads that is a lot smaller in diameter. Your bead size and your diameter of that tube is going to make a huge difference in the size you're actually going to make. The one thing that you'll want to do, if you're making the bangle for yourself or for a friend and you have access to them, the best thing to do is to measure this widest part of the hand here, because your bangle has to be able to roll easily on and off over that widest part of your hand. So let's say you need an 8.5 inch bangle because it has to go over this largest size. So you know it has to be that way, but when you lay it out on a ruler, it's going to be about an inch longer than what you actually need it because of the circumference of your tube. So if you need, let's say, an 8.5, because of this, then you would lay it on a ruler and it would be 9.5 inches because it's going to have to take up about another inch because of that circumference that on that inside. Now, that means if you needed a 7.5 bangle, then when you lay it out on a ruler, it's going to be 8.5 inches. Okay, so that's one thing you kind of have to play with. Another thing you have to think about when you're making your bangles is there is a wonderful product on the market, and we sell it on the website, called Nozu Sunoco thread. Nozu Sunoco thread is a normal thread, but it has a little bit of a stretch to it, and it is fantastic when you're making bangles because it allows you to go ahead and make your bangle more closely to the size you actually need for your wrist size, because it allows the beadwork to stretch out just enough to get it over here without making a huge difference. And so it allows your bangles to be more to the size of your wrist than having it a little big and moving around on your arm. So that thread is amazing. And like I said, it's fantastic for bangles. It does take a little while to get used to it because, when we pull our thread, we're used to, once we pull it through, that thread stops. When you pull this thread through, it still stops, but it's got a little bit of like a pushback or a bounce back to it because it does have that little bit of stretch. So that is always an option you have as well. If you are going to make a bracelet that has a clasp on it, like this one here, then you will need to account for the fact that you will need about 1 inch to attach your clasp. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well. But you're going to need about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So you'll consider that in your beadwork as well. The best thing to do is the more of these you kind of make and play with, the more you're going to be comfortable with your sizing and knowing kind of exactly what size that you have. But if anything, if it all else fails, just keep putting it around your wrist and checking it to see what size. Again, I wish that I could tell you it is, sizing on these is the easiest thing in the world, but sometimes it's not, and we just have to roll with it. They do make bracelet sizers that you can purchase, and it slides right over, and those are amazing as well. So just an FYI on that. So let's go ahead and look and see how we finish this out as a bangle and as a bracelet with a clasp. When you're satisfied with the length of your piece, then you're ready to make it into a bangle. Now, when you do that, you'll want to come to the end here first and thread a needle onto this end, and you're not pulling anything together. You're just passing through the beads and tying off the threads with a few half-hitch knots. And then I stitch through to get rid of that thread. We're going to connect the two ends, so we don't want to do anything to disturb the beads that are here. Now on the end where we just finished, what you'll want to do is you'll want to pass through these 2 rows again. So from where you're coming out of that 15, you will pass through 2 11s, your lower and your upper, 2 8s, which is your lower and your upper, 2 6s, lower and upper, 2 8s, lower and upper, 2 11s, lower and upper, and then through the 15 again. So that this will allow you to be able to keep everything tight as you work. Now, if you look at your piece, what we want to do is we want to move this and curve this to where when you put these together, they will line up like that. So I'm coming out of the 15 on the end of my piece, and I'm going to see if I can zoom in just a little. Here we go. Okay, so with that on the end, I'm going to take now, and I'm coming out of that 15, and I'm going to come across to the beginning. I'm going to call this the beginning end. So I'm going to come across to the beginning end, and I'm going to go through the single 15 here on this first row that we started with. It's going to be the one that is quote unquote sticking up. So I'm going to pass through that single 15 there. I'm going to leave this a little loose here for just a second so you can see that connection. Now I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to pass through the 11-0 sticking up here on the end. So this is the end. There I finished. So I'm going to skip one 11 and go through the next 11, which is the one sticking up there. Now I'm going to come to the beginning end up here, and I'm going to go through the 11-0, which is the one here in my little single circle. I'm going to go through that one 11-0 there. And you can pull it tightly if you want to as you work. It's completely up to you. Okay, now I'm going to come and I'm going to pass through the next 8. So I'm going to skip one and I'm going to go through one here on the end. And then I'm going to come up here to the top, to the beginning end, and I'm going to go through that 8. Now I'm leaving these loose so you can see the beads and how they're connecting together there. And you're going to kind of have to twist it out a little bit like this. So I've gone through the 8 here. So now I'm going to come to my 6s. And I'm going to come to this second 6, which is the very end one. And then I'm going to come to this 6 here on the beginning end. Twist. Okay, so I'm coming out of the 6 there. So now I'm going to come to the 8 here on the end. Then through the 8 on the beginning end. Then through the 11 here on the end. And then through the 11 here on the beginning end. And then I'm going to pull everything tightly. And right now, like I have one bead, I've got an 8 here, or a 6 is kind of poking in, so I can pull that out a little bit. But you can see now, once I pull it tightly, you can't really tell where I started and where I finished. There's one last little bead I've got to go through. Got to thread my needle here. So once I go through that last 11, I'm going to pull it back a little bit. You'll see here, I'm going to go through, it's going to look like it's right next to it. It's the 15 that's in this space. It's just the thread has pulled loose a little bit, so it's pulling up there where it should go. So I'm going to go through that 15. And now that completes the connection. And then what I'll do is I will work and I will go back and forth through that connection as many times as I can. So that way I don't have to worry about that connection coming apart. And then I can tie the piece off. You can see that once you have the thread stitched in and tied off, you can't tell where you started and where you stopped. So you get a really nice bangle that you can make and stack together or wear singularly. It's completely up to you. For this one, I'm going to show you how to attach a clasp. So you're going to need some beading wire. You can pretty much use any kind you want. I'm going to be using this 49 strand 0.018 beading wire. And something I found that makes this process a lot easier is I've taken a piece of 16 gauge wire and I've cut it longer than the bracelet itself. If you try to put just your piece of wire through here, you are going to say naughty, naughty words because it's going to want to come out of some of the spaces. So I take the end of the wire and I use some painter's tape to attach the beading wire to the wire itself. And right now, I still have both threads attached. I've not done anything with them yet because we are going to slide the wire and the beading wire in before we actually go ahead and finish off the threads. So, you see how easy that was? It went right through. And carefully pull that through. And so now my beading wire is inside of this. So if I wanted to, I could put some bicones on the end and make this the front of a necklace and maybe finish off the ends with beads or whatever I want to do, but I am going to do that bracelet. So now it's just a measure of taking the painter's tape off and showing how to finish the end. So you can use some more of that painter's tape if you want to put on the ends of your wire so that they don't come off. Or if you have some little bead stoppers, you can put that on your wire as well. Because what we need to do now is actually finish off our threads. So I'm going to come here to the end of the bracelet, the working end. And what I want to do is I want to finish off. So I still need to add an 8 and an 11. Now, once that's complete, then what we want to do is we are going to go through and we're going to only pass through the beads that we added in this round. So I'm only going to pass through the beads that are sticking up. And as I do that, I'm going to be careful to make sure that this stays in the center and that I'm not catching the thread on anything. So I'm just going to pass through only the beads, again, that are sticking up. And I'm going to pull this tight as I work. This is why it was important in the beginning that we left that excess thread so that we had it to pull. All right, so I'm going to come out of the last size 8 I added on the row. And I'm going to do a little half hitch knot. So I'm going to go under that working thread, leave a loop, and pass through the loop. I'm going to do it again. And then I'm going to pass through the 6. When I get over here on the other side of that 6, I'm going to do the same thing. Whoop. Whoop. Sorry, guys. Oh, that wasn't good. It got caught there on the tray. And now that I've got that secure, I'm going to pass through a couple of more beads. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim off that short leftover thread. And now I'm going to do the same thing here on the other side. Guys, I was so excited to get this bracelet done so I could show you that I totally forgot. I went ahead and put on an end. So let's go ahead and show you how to finish off the other end. So I have my wire, and what I'm doing is I've threaded on a 6mm bicone. I have threaded on a crimp tube, and then I'm going to thread on a wire protector. I'm going to pass up through one side of the wire protector and then down the other side. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead and thread on my clasp. And then I'm going to grab a hold of my crimp and my bicone. And I'm going to pass through both of those beads. And on this side, I just put it through the bicone and then I trimmed that thread. And I'm going to pull it here so you can see it. So you can see there where I've trimmed that little piece of wire since it's inside the bicone. Now on this side, what we're going to do before we pull this thread tight, we're going to run the beading wire through the tube. Now, you'll see here it came out of the tube, and that's completely fine. That's what I want it to do, because we still want to run the wire a little bit through, but we can't really do that like we do on this side. So I'm going to hold the clasp. I'm going to hold this wire, and I'm going to gently pull it so that the ends come together like that. Before I finish it off, I'm going to go ahead and attach that clasp. I'm going to make sure nothing is too tight. And see right there how that came out? This is good. This is why we do this on this. So we just make sure to get that back in there. I'm going to pull this end again. There we go. Make sure it's tight in there and it's all good and that it's all well and feels right. And then once I do that, then I'm going to use my crimp pliers and I'm going to crimp this crimp. Now, if you have never crimped with crimp pliers before, I will post a link to a video I did a couple of years ago that is very step-by-step and shows you how to do that. And then once I have that crimped, then I will take it, trim that little excess piece of wire. That's enough I could use for a bracelet, so I'm going to set that to the side to use for later. And then I have the completed bracelet with a clasp. So I can take it. Let's see here. And that is fabulous. Now, if you were worried, if you did not make this big enough and it's still a little tight, you can add a little piece of safety chain here at your wire protectors, and that will also help in case it pops open. You won't lose the bracelet, and you'll be super happy with that one. So friends, I hope you enjoyed learning how to do Cellini Spiral, and that you learned how to add the clasp, make it into a bangle, and then learned how you can play and make different diameter tubes with your different beads. Again, all of the samples that I showed you earlier are on the pattern, and you can find the step-by-step pattern for this at Off the Beaded Path beadstore.com. It shows you how to make the bangle, it gives you all of these little things, and it gives you a little bit more information. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I hope you'll come back next time when we will be learning how to do tubular peyote stitch. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.